comes into the church and we talk about the shroud. We have a copy of the shroud, and I made a tradition that this copy, the black and white and the original copy, will be hung in the church during Holy Week, starting Holy Week, and all the way to the end of the 50 days. We didn't do this. We didn't do this year, of course, because we didn't have, you know, an in-church Holy Week. It was on Zoom. But I always like to stand on the southern side of the church during Holy Week, facing the shroud, especially. So I put one behind me, which is the original brownish copy of the shroud, and in front of me I would have the black and white, and the black and white would have the face. And since the shroud appeared in the media, I was not aware of it until I was maybe in high school in Egypt. I remember the first time somebody came to give a talk about the shroud, it fascinated me, completely grabbed me. For some reason or another, I just can't let go of it. And most of the people that came across the shroud had the same effect. Most of them, those who were Christian and admired it, especially if you like icons, like I do. And so there's a lot to talk about. It's the most studied relic in history. Let me just say it right now: hundreds of thousands of hours. Not thousands, not 10,000, hundreds. We're very close to 1,000,000 hours of human study of one object. And it's the most controversial thing. People are tearing each other clothes at what this means and how it was made and all that stuff. So the shroud is fascinating from all kinds of views. To me, I don't have any doubt about it, no matter what they say. That's to me, that's personally. It doesn't really matter for anybody's faith. It's intriguing and it's very, very attractive to think about it and look at it. But as a church, we don't really base our faith on a relic or any kind of historical document or any of it. We have our faith already decided by the church, and we have a creed, and that's it. But it's really interesting because I think in the shroud there is messages of the suffering and the resurrection of Christ at the same time. We always talk about this. There's a lot there. We always talk about that the cross and the resurrection is like two faces to one coin. The shroud is the same. Absolutely. One thing, they've always wanted to do a carbon dating, and this happened in the 80s. I think 1988. Eventually, they got a piece from the shroud to be carbon dated. And the dates from 3 different laboratories, I think one in Germany, one in America, and one in Italy, they confirmed it to be between the 12th century and the 14th century. So they concluded the shroud age belongs to medieval times, or, you know. So there has to be something wrong with that, because there's a ton of other studies, tons of other studies that dates that. I'm going to show you some of the stuff. Some of it is historical, some very established historical facts. So what should I say about the shroud that is 100,000 or hundreds of thousands studies have been done on it in 30, 40 minutes? What can I say? What can I say? It's like something you're going to say about Christ. What can you say about Christ in 40 minutes? So I want to start by those of us who doesn't know the story of the shroud or its existence. Some people don't know that it actually exists. And when I talk to people, many people don't know that it exists. So the shroud was a possession in recent, when I say recent, like last couple of centuries, recent couple of centuries. I mean, I'm talking about that now. In the 1800s, it belonged to the royal family in Italy. Before the French Revolution, it belonged to the French royalties, Louis XVI. And you know the story of Louis XVI and his queen and how they were executed but he felt that this is coming on, and they owned the shroud, and they gave it as a gift to the Italian royalty, and the Italian royalty in turn give it to the Pope of Rome. And if you ask Barry Schwartz, who is one of the biggest fans of the shroud, Barry Schwartz is a Jewish man who is not converted to Christianity. He is the official photographer of the shroud with the stirrup in 1978. So Barry Schwartz says they did a good job, and the French royalty, the French king, Louis XVI, when he felt that it's dangerous to keep the shroud anymore because he's going to be killed in the process, he knew that. So he said he's going to offer it to one person. He's not going to give it to a group of people, because when you have a group of people, when things are really bad, they can't make a decision. They fight, and they never come up with an urgent decision. So he gives it to one man to take care of it. And eventually the same thing, the royal family in Italy did the same thing. In that time, during the Savoy family in Italy, in the last part of the 19th century, lived in Italy a lawyer by the name of Secondo Pea. Somebody's talking? Secondo Pea. He was a lawyer and an amateur photographer when photography was a very recent discovery. So he lived 1855 to 1940. He was 90 years old or 85 when he died. In I'm talking about 1800s, 19th century. 1898 specifically, on May the 25th, the Italian king, in coordination with the church, decided to put the shroud on exhibition. Secondo went and he said, "Can I use the photography on it?" And in those days, you remember, it was not really the digital camera, it was not even the analog camera, the camera with the film. What was it? It was a sensitive plate. You get that plate, that very big, huge glass plate covered with a film of, is it silver nitrate or silver nitrate, right? And then you go into your dark room, and there you develop it. So Secondo Pea got his camera, which was a huge box like this, with the plate in the back and a little lens in the front. It was just a regular box with a plate in the back. And he took advantage of the break during noontime and went set up the camera, got his helpers, and used a newly, he was the first one, he was a pioneer in this, a newly discovered incandescent light discovered by Edison. So this was very new. So he used how many bulbs to get this picture done. So he put the things and set everything, turned on the bulbs, and took the picture. He went home. It was bad. It was too much exposure. So he went back on the 28th, almost the last day of the exhibition, and he did it again. This time he went home and developed the picture, and they say, he described it, he almost dropped the plate, the glass plate. He almost dropped it when he saw it, because on that plate was an image of a face. So let me show you first what the original shroud looks like. I have it laid on the ground here, but this is a much more vivid. We did this in 2005 or 2004 by a company who does vinyl per prints. So I'm going to take you to the copy we have, and then we go through the digital copy that we have in online. So let's see if I can turn the camera and you can see what I'm seeing. So this is what everybody sees when they go watch. I went in 2010 and I saw the Shroud in Turin. That's what you would see. But this is a much more vivid image. The other one is much fainter. You have to step back maybe 20 meters to really see something. Go back, or 20 feet, I'm sorry, 20 feet, like maybe 7 meters. So this is the front, and you can see the face, how it looks. This is what everybody saw if they were at the time of Secondo Pea. And this is the back, and that's the head, and the shoulders, the buttocks, the calves, and the feet. When Secondo Pea took that first plate and developed it, that's what shocked him. Nobody understood that the image that was, because nobody knew, this photography was new. That's what he saw. Imagine if you are developing your thing in the lab and all what you see is this. This is shocking, right? I would be shocked. It's something awesome, something that nobody expected. You go from this, which is very difficult to understand what this is. They know it's a kind of face and they can see some hair and some cheeks and stuff, to the other one. So this was the beginning. Actually, Pea is what had begun what we call today the science of syndiony, the syndinology. And the syndinology is the science of studying the shroud. It's now a science, actually. It has a term. So what happened after that? He became the official photographer of the shroud. They made icons of it, and studies started to happen. The Vatican and the Pope had kept the shroud under guard, and after that, and before that, actually, there was lots of trials to burn the shroud, and one of them was by accident. It was not meant. That's in the 12th century, and it left marks. What we're going to talk about later. But recently, in 2000 and maybe 9, or I might be mistaken, in that time, like within those 10 years, a human being, a person in Turin, tried to really burn the whole church on intention to get rid of that relic. Now, we'll go back to the shroud. So what does the shroud have to tell us? I want to kind of crystallize what we're going to talk about into a few points. I didn't count them yet, so I can't give you a number. So one, what was in the shroud? What's the image about? And there's 3 kinds of imprints on the shroud. The history of the shroud. Some people went and done an extensive research on the history. The forensic study of the shroud, they got some forensic experts to look at it. One of them, a very famous German forensic, I think he's German, his name is Max Frey. And he done a lot of studies on it, very impressive stuff. We have actually people from North Carolina joined in the study group that went, they call them STIRB, in the 1978. There's photographing and imaging studies done on the shroud, amazing stuff too. And eventually, we want to talk about the relationship of the shroud to the gospel. One thing from the shroud that I don't have an image of is another piece of cloth that is in Oviedo, Spain. And that piece of cloth is part of the burial clothing of Christ mentioned in St. John. And we will bring this in to talk about the shroud. So let's go together. I'm going to share with you the screen into the shroud.com. It's a website done by, I think it's mainly by Barry Schwartz. Barry is the official photographer, like I said, of the STIRB team that went to Vatican in 1978. And that included John Jackson and other people. Some of them, one of them is here in North Carolina. And they did all kinds of extensive study. They were given a chance to do that. And they called them the STIRB team. The scientific, I think the scientific Turin, or the scientific Turin, I'm sorry, Shroud of Turin research project. I'm sorry, that's what it is. Shroud of Turin research project, that's STIRB team. So if I go with you to the website, and And that's their website. And then on the website, you would have different things. And then one of them I would like to go to first is examine the Shroud of Turin. You would have an image of the shroud. I'm going to make it bigger. This is the shroud as it should look. This is a high quality, but not very, not very high definition, but high quality image that can be broken into pieces. Before we point into different things, I don't know if you can see the different areas. I'm gonna make sure that we have the three imprints on the shroud. The most prominent of all the imprints is these dark, very dark spots. The ones that runs in line like this. And around those patches. The triangular lighter color are patches. The poor nuns of Clare after the fire in the 12th century, they went in and tried to repair the burned areas. But the rest of the darker spots are scorched from the fire. Why is it happening in linear fashion? And this, the researcher said, this most probably is the reason of folding the shroud into different folds. Let me just tell you what happened. So in this case, the shroud was folded, and it was in a box of silver. And when the box melted, some of the silver that melted went on the corners and the edges and burned it. So when you open the fold, you would have lines running through the edges of the shroud. We go back. This is the first of the marks on the shroud and the most prominent. When you go to the next kind of marks, and they are also prominent, I will bring in these heavy-duty marks of a liquid. You see them on the image of the hand. On the left hand, they're running down in a line. In the right hand, you see two lines with an angle. There's also a big, I don't know how to bring an arrow or something, a big blob of reddish material, blood kind of color, next to that patch on top. Different than the scorch mark. If you can see
can you use your cursor, Abuna?
I'm trying to, I don't know how. Let me see. I'm gonna bring it back into the original size. I don't know if the cursor would use, how would you use that?
I don't think it will work on a tablet, Abuna.
No, it would not work on a tablet. All right, so if you can, I'm gonna bring it as far as I can to the center and then as big as I can. You see that little, there's a scorch mark and there's a patch, and under the bottom patch, there is a collection of blood. Next to it, running diagonally, is a line of blood. And under it, there is another angle of blood, and then blood on the other arm. This is the second type of, when you go to the back, I'm going to give you the back, there is more blood on the back. And here you have it. You see that runs around the waist. There's more around the head, like around the head area. I'm going to bring it to the center, this area here. I hope everybody can see what I'm pointing at. The two spots on the bottom and at the top are burn marks. But the circular one at the middle with lots of drops, it is blood marks. When you come very close to it, it is red. And everybody who saw it in proximity, they said they're more vivid than they expected for a blood from 2,000 years. And then there's more stuff all over until you get to the feet, and there's a trickle of blood going up from the top foot. So that's the second one. The third one, which is the one that we are most concerned with, is the image. The image, which is a fascinating thing. An image of a face, front, torso, chest, abdomen, arms, thighs, knees, legs, and feet, front and back. You have it on both sides, on a piece of linen. When Secondo Pea took the picture, we discovered that this image is actually a negative. What do we mean by a negative? Now, people, young people who in the age of digital camera, they wouldn't really understand this. In the old times, when you took a picture, it was the reverse of reality. So the black will become white and the white will become black, and you have to go into the lab, your photography lab, and then reverse things into a paper or a photograph paper that has a certain chemical that reverse whatever you've done with the negative. So as if this linen cloth itself is a negative image of the person who was sleeping in it or laying in it. And then when you go into the lab and do a negative of a negative, that's a mathematical thing, you negative the negative, you get a positive. That's why Secondo Pea got a positive. This was an interesting thing, because what would do that? How can you get an image, a negative image of a corpse? Very clearly, the man in this cloth was dead. And it's really very simple to understand, if you're familiar with the crucifixion, that he was crucified. So how do you get an image from a crucified body after the death of the human being, and then even if he doesn't die? Million theories came out, a lot of theories. Every single person who came in touch with this came up with an idea. What did the STURP team say? I want to read this with you. What did the STURP team who went into 1978 had to say? And this, we will go back to the original summary of the STURP team. So this is a summary, not the whole the study. They did a lot of work on it. They said no pigments, paints, dyes, or stains have been found on the fibrils. X-ray fluorescence and microchemistry on the fibrils preclude the possibility of paint being used as a method for creating the image. Schwartz said, when we were planning to go as a team, we were talking. We will go there, they bring the shroud, we will look closely at it, we see the paint, the brush marks, and the pigments, and we'll say it's a fake and we'll go home. What they saw was nothing of sorts. Computer image enhancement analysis by a device known as VPA, I'll show you that, VP8 image, it's an older now kind of technology. Analyzers show that the image has unique three-dimensional information encoded in it. Microchemical evaluation has indicated no evidence of any spices, oils, or any biochemicals known to be produced by the body in life or in death. Some people said most probably there is urea released from the body when a person dies. They couldn't find any of it. It's clear that there has been a direct contact of the shroud with the body, which explains certain features such as scourge marks, we'll see that, as well as the blood. However, while this type of contact might explain some of the features of the torso, it's totally incapable of explaining the image of the face with the high resolution that has been amply demonstrated by photography. You can enlarge this picture as much as you want. If you took it with regular, traditional, or now you can say old style photography. We took Barry Schwartz small. I'm going to show them to you. Small film. It's like 30 millimeters film, and then that means 3 centimeters image. And we give it to the company to produce this 7-foot, 7 by 3 feet shroud vinyl, and it didn't lose any of its power. The basic problem from a scientific point of view is that some explanations which might be tenable from chemical point of view are precluded by physics. Contrawise, certain physical explanations which may be attractive are completely precluded by the chemistry. For an adequate explanation of the image of the shroud, one must have an explanation which is scientifically sound from a physical, chemical, biological, and medical viewpoint. At the present, this type of solution does not appear to be obtainable. Until this day, by the way, by the best efforts of the members of the Shroud team. Furthermore, experiments in physics and chemistry, with old linen, have produced something which resulted in oxidation, dehydration, and conjugation of the polysaccharide structure of the microfibrils of the linen itself. They explained that the chemical change. They said oxidative dehydration and conjugation. It's chemical reactions. Such changes can be duplicated in the laboratory by certain chemical and physical processes. A similar type of change in linen can be obtained by sulfuric acid or heat. However, there are no chemical or physical methods known which can account for the totality of the image, nor can any combination of physical, chemical, biological, or medical circumstances explain the image adequately. Thus, the answer, this is the question the STURB team went on to answer. The question that they went to answer is, what made the image? What imprinted the image? How do you explain the mechanism scientifically? And the answer they got is, thus the answer of the question of how the image was produced or what produced the image remains now, as it has in the past, a mystery. That's their answer. So they came out from the long study and they said, we don't know. We can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It's not the product of an artist. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. The image is an ongoing mystery until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists, or perhaps by some scientists in the future. The problem remains unsolved. And is still the case. So I want to go with you now and pay attention to the details of the image, especially of the imprinted image. So when we go and examine the Shroud of Turin, they were different on how tall was Christ in the image of the shroud. And some said 5'7" all the way to 6'2". So he's somewhere in between, maybe 5'9" or 5'10". If you notice, I'm going to start with the face. The face in the original one and in the negative has a long nose, and there's blood stains on the forehead, especially the one when you go into the reverse, the black and white, it looks like a number 3. There's blood all over the head. And this matches the description of the crown of thorns. The crown of thorns in the image of the shroud is not a circular one like the common icons will make it. It's actually a full head cover. And the pollens they found, it's from a plant called Gondylia torniforti. It's a plant that looks like lettuce. Imagine a lettuce heart, but then each leaf of that lettuce ends with a thorn that's almost 2 or 3 inch long. So what would they do is that they will make make that big lettuce heart, and they would put it upside down on the head of the victim, and they would tie it with a rope to make sure that it doesn't fall. And then in the gospel, it says they banged on his head with a stick to make sure that this big, long thorns go in. And you know how much a head, a scalp is very bloody. Anytime a person gets hit in the head, it's really bloody, the blood coming down. So there was lots of blood coming from the head, and most probably trickled down his face. We're going to talk about the Sudarium, that other piece of cloth, and what was the function of it. Go back to the shroud, and we have something about the face. If you look at in the image, the brown image, you have a more prominent, darker areas on the right side, which in the black and white will be the left side. Everything is reversed in the black and white. So you have to kind of mirror image the two. It's reversed. So he had a mustache, had a beard, has long hair, and when we go to the torso, you'll find that that hair is made into a ponytail. Big eyes, and you notice something about the nose. That the nose is bent a little bit. If you go follow the line of the nose, it is, and what we call in medicine, dislocated. The nose has two pieces, has a bony piece attached to the skull and a cartilage piece that's soft, you can move it. And apparently, at one point of the course of Friday, he hit the like something very very hard as he fell and dislocated the nose. It was not broken, but the cartilage left its attachment place in the bone. On the cheek, which is in the black and white, will be the left side, or his right, our left, and then the brown would be our right, his left. So it is the same, it's just a mirror image. There is a lot of swollen tissue. You compare the two cheeks, the one on one side is regular, more or less. The one on the left, on the other side, which is his right side actually, is swollen, almost closing the eye. And the same side, when you look down to the beard, the hair is thinner. Not as much hair as you would find on the other side. Right side, pulling the hair of the beard and smacking and slapping. This was known as the real humiliation. We read it back in the Old Testament when a king wanted to humiliate the ambassadors of another king. He shaved their right side from head to toe, and he sent them back with half beard, half mustache, half hair. That right side is gone. So that was known in antiquities, that when you humiliate somebody, that you actually pull and slap their right side. When you look at the hair and the beard, there is a very clear straight line of dark line going down on the sides and turning around the beard, almost dividing the beard in half. And those who studied this, and including the forensic person, they said this is common to close the mouth. Those of us who had been in a recent death, when you go visit, or sometimes when I go and visit the family, when they have the grandfather or somebody died, we work hard to close the mouth and the eyes. Most of the cases they remain open unless they were asleep, but the mouth definitely will open up. So you need something to wrap around the head to keep the mouth closed. So they think there was a handkerchief or a face cloth that wrapped around the head. Now, there's a lot to say about the rest of the image. I'm gonna move to the next part. When you go to the chest, there is signs of water marks. This is a water mark. That's nothing from the image itself. That's maybe the fourth mark on the shroud. It's when they try to put off the fire and cool the silver box in the 12th century. From the fire, they put that water and it actually stained. I don't know if there's anything on the chest, but there is all these little images that we will look more onto when we go to the here's the chest. You can see there is lots of blood marks. You see them all over the place, and these are signs of flagellation, signs of scourging. Now we go to this spot here. What is this spot? It's a dense blood stain. It's the most dense blood stain on the shroud. It is in the area of the right side. When you look at it in the black and white, it's the area on the right side of the body image, below one of the patches in a heavy scorch area. This is an area where the burn was bad. It's often referred to as the site of this, or the spear wound blood stain. The blood will go from this area to trickle around the waist to the back. So this is where you have the spear. So the images that shows the spear on the right side, that is very much correlating to the image. You see that the blood stain is interrupted by clearer color, and most probably people think this was because of the mix of the blood and water that came from his side. When I go and shrink this and go to the back of the image, you would have blood coming. Remember from what side this was? This is on the upper side. You turn it around, it's coming. Actually from this side and going there. So there's blood trickling around to the back of the waist. Now I want to go on to the hands. And there is here an image of the two hands, one on top of the other. We decided that the side stain, the blood stain, is on the right. So which hand is on top of the other? So here, the one in contact with the shroud is the other side hand, which is the left hand. The left hand is on top of the right. One thing you notice in the hands, if you count the fingers, there are 4 fingers. We can't see a thumb in neither of them. And this is the forensic people looked at it and they said, this is a real crucifixion, because when you stick a nail in the area here, let's go into the hand, and you stick a nail, see this, the fingers here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Stick a nail in this area. This is actually a little bit, it's very close to the wrist joint itself. And in this area, it could be actually lower than the wrist joint. It's in the hand itself. But what is there? They said they're gonna be the median nerve, the nerve that supplies what we call the thenar eminence, or the thumb abductive muscles. So when you put something to irritate that nerve and hurt it, the nerve will be irritated and send signals of protection to the muscles it supplies, and will bring the thumb in and would take it very close to the hand, so the person cannot really extend it. So that's what happened, that the 2 thumbs were brought in closer to the palm of the hand because the nerve that supplies the thumbs were taken or were hurt by nails. And they also asked, how come that the blood trickle on the hand is two lines, not one. Seems like it's really weird that we have two hands. So they said most probably the hand was in two different positions on the cross. And there was a 30-degree angle between the two positions. And why? He said when someone is on the cross and their hands are stretched too hard up and they're carrying their body by their arms, it fixes their chest. It pulls the chest out so they cannot breathe. You all do this, and I do this as an exercise, and we all go and we do this and stretch our hands up all the way and try to take a breath after that. What happens? Now I'm hung and I'm actually using my hands to hang my body. So all the weight of the body is on the hands. And I try to take a breath. Try it, all of us. Let's try it. Just take your hands as far as you can up, as far as you can. And then try to take a deep breath, which we do normally. We do normally. Every few breaths, we take a deep breath. You can't. Why? Because the arms are attached to the chest, likewise your diaphragm, likewise your ribs. So to give enough muscle length to do both at the same time is impossible. So what happens after a person is hung on the cross and doing this? That's what forensics said. They cannot breathe, and they will retain carbon dioxide, and they will feel suffocated. And carbon dioxide in the blood makes a person go crazy for breathing. They would want to get that out. So what they do, they use their feet down. Imagine these are my feet with a nail in them, to push down so they can lift up their body, so they can relax the arms, so they can take a breath. And when the feet does this for a while, the feet starts to hurt. You're not standing on your soles, you're standing on a nail that is going through them. So after a little bit, you get so hurt in the feet that you have to let go and go back to your hands. So this is what the Romans used to do. The Romans knew if you pull the person too hard and nail them to the cross on the two sides, they will die quickly. You don't want that to happen. So what do? They relax the feet. That's why Jesus' knees were little bent, so that he can actually keep doing this for days. They used to keep people on the cross for days. And eventually the person would get tired and do what? And give up. That's why it's understandable now. When they come to break the legs, what they're trying to do, so that the person on the cross, if they want to kill them quickly, they can lose the support of the legs, so that when they hang from the hands, they die very quickly. And this will not take maybe an hour or two. They will start suffocating. So this is the reason for this angle on the shroud image, that angle. Now we go back. And the whole body is covered with this lines. You see it everywhere, front and back. We'll see it more on the back. And the feet, it's very difficult to see the feet here, but there's blood stain in the feet area. Now we go to the back and look at the back. That's a good image of the back. Here is the comparing the images from before 2002 and after 2002, because what they did is they send a very experienced nuns who are trained in textile, and they took off the backing of the cloth and they put a new backing and they removed the patches. So what you see in the bottom part is the burned area without patches, just showing the backing cloth in the back and removing the patches off and leaving the burned area exposed. So when we go to the back image, you have the head with the crown of thorns covering everything. You have the shoulders. And the shoulders, they notice something about it. All this, let's see if there's any studies of the, we have a study of the back. I don't think we have a study of the back like the front. I don't see it. Okay. So when you look at the back, you see all these dots. And if you go closer to the dots, you will notice they're twos. They're like dumbbells.
Buna, do you want the back picture?
I don't know where it is.
I have it.
Okay. So when you go back to the black and white, here it is, the dumbbells. You can see it in the black and white more clearly. They're all twos. And this is covering the back, especially the shoulder area, where there's two things I want to talk about. Is the first one is the scourging is done by a whip known in the Roman times as the flagrum. And the flagrum is a strips of leather that ends with pieces of glass or bone or rocks. So it's not just strips of leather that you scourge a person with, but the end of them is covered with or tied to hard objects that would inflict damage on the skin. The first time you go and hit someone with it, it causes a bruise. If it hits that part again, it will take off the skin, because the skin will become like the scallop, like when you do meat tenderizing, you hammer it or you do it so it starts to let loose of its connection or bonding. You notice something about the shoulder. Okay, when you go to the shoulder and you compare the shoulder to the back, the shoulder, the markings are not very sharp. They're diffuse. They're not really clearly marked. And they said, so what is the point that the shoulder, and you see the ponytail in the back and the hair going out all the way down to the area of the shoulder blade. Why the shoulders are faint? So they said most probably there was a heavy object on the shoulder after the scourging that made the skin, the tenderized skin, the macerated skin, to kind of flatten and lose its sharp edges. They also noticed in the shroud there was at least 2 bleeding sets. So they said there was a bleeding, and there was a cloth put on the body, and then when the cloth was stripped and the bleeding started again. When you go down to the buttocks, the strips of the scourging goes all the way to the calf, all the way to even the ankles, some of them, from the shoulder to the ankle, front and back. And at the very bottom of the feet, there is holes. And we go back to the shroud. Let's just go back to the shroud. No, that's not what I want. Okay. When you go to the feet, you see there is a tendency for the right foot to go under the left foot. They put the feet together, but you see that there is a little twist in the right foot going under the left foot, and there's blood on the heel of both of them. And they said in the shroud there's blood and dirt. So he was barefooted, and his foot was covered with dirt. Eventually, they put this. So it seems from the shroud that the crucifixion happened with one foot on top of the other, and it's the left foot on top of the right. And you see the marks of scourging all over the place, all the way to the shoulder. When you look at the samples of the flagrum from museums of the Roman flagrum, it fits the markings of the shroud. They say the forensic people would say there were two soldiers hitting Christ at the same time from two sides. And he was bent over a short column, and one of them is taller than the other. That's how they said it happened. Now I'm done with this, and I want to. This is very quickly, and I didn't really go over details, but other pieces of information that the blood found there has real hemoglobin and has positive for albumin, like the report said. Also, they found the blood type to be AB. What about the history? The history. The history of the shroud. The first time the shroud is mentioned in history is in the history of a country. It's part of Turkey now. It's called Odessa. And I would recommend this. I can't find the other one. You can find this movie. It's called The Silent Witness. It's a good movie. It's an older movie. So they have all that stuff and more. Then I want to get you to the map. I don't know if you can hear the voice. Can anyone hear the voice there?
No, Abuna.
Okay. I'm just going to move it to where the map is, and they describe how the shroud moved here. Here is the map. So retracing it back from Turin, where it is lying now, to France, to a very rich person in France, inherited it from his father. And they found the same name carried by one of the Knight Templar, the group of crusaders that were very famous in the time for being mysterious and they think they are the ones who got it from Byzantium. Why, they ask, why did it appear in France out of all the places? Let's see if I can get you. So what I want to tell you, so I don't want to kind of bore you with this. If I can get a map, I'll be able to do this better. Okay. Mediterranean map. Of 1st century. So look at one like this. If it's clear, can't see anything. Okay. So in this area where the Black Sea is and Galatia, there is the kingdom of Edessa. Today it is in Turkey. And there was a king, his name was Abgar V. The history of the church, even in our church, says that Abgar was very sick with certain kind of chronic disease. And he asked Christ in Jerusalem or in Israel to come to heal him. And Jesus refused to come out of Israel. And he said, when I ascend or when I leave, I'll send one of my disciples. The tradition of Odessa says that there was one of the disciples of Christ and they have him by name, I don't remember his name, took the shroud with him to Odessa. And there, that piece of cloth healed the king. Later on, his son turned to paganism and started persecuting Christians, so they actually hid it in a wall. And when the war came and Byzantium started to be a kingdom, they besieged the city and they took the Odessa, the place, and they found the shroud in the wall of the gate of the city, and there it stayed in Byzantium for a long time, being displayed for the big feasts of the royal family. In the time of the Crusaders, and they came through, they actually took the shroud from Turkey, and they were afraid of they were afraid that actually at the time they were afraid that this would be destroyed, so they kept it in France, and that's where the Knight Templars come into play, and they took many of the relics and turned back to France, and they kept it there. And then France gave it to or reached to the royal family of Italy, and there they give it to the Pope, and that's where it stays today. There is another piece of cloth that I want you to look at, and this piece of cloth is called the Sudarium of Oviedo. I'll read this with you. Where is Oviedo? It's in Spain. One of the relics held by cathedral in the town of Oviedo in the north of Spain is a piece of cloth measuring approximately 84 times 53 centimeters. There is no image on this cloth. Only stains are visible to the naked eye, although more is visible under the microscope. The remarkable thing about this cloth is that both tradition and scientific studies claim that the cloth was used to cover and clean the face of Jesus after the crucifixion. We are going to present a look into these claims. So what does the cloth look like? Here it is. This is the cloth. These two spots are most probably put under the nose or in the nose and the mouth. And how they were put, and they say, and from the study, it's put like that. Why is the man's arm is raised? See the spots, and they have the marking of the spots. He said most probably the first time this cloth was put 3 times. They put it on when he was on the cross to absorb the blood and the fluids coming from the face. And as they bring him down for the first time, once they brought him down, they did it again. And after they are about to put him in the tomb, they do it again. What is this for? The Jewish tradition says you're not supposed to clean blood. When somebody is bleeding, you're not supposed to throw that blood away. It's considered sacred. So what they do, they soak it, they sponge it out from the face by the piece of cloth, and they would bury it with him. Bury it with him. So there is in the account of St. John, there was other burial cloth with the shroud. When you look at the blood stains doesn't match those of the head except one. And it's not the Mark III that we saw. But the rest of it coincide completely with the places where the nose is bleeding and where the mouth is bleeding. And it's the same blood type, AB. There is a lot of fingerprint marks. They said the body was laying on the floor of the cross, at the foot of the cross for about 45 minutes before being buried. The marks, not fingerprints of the fingers that held the cloth to the nose, are also visible. The experiments with the model head and the study of the stains also show that when the man died, his head was tilted 70 degrees forward and 20 degrees to the right. This position rather further suggests that the man whose face the Sudarium covered died crucified. Or similar blood stains on the side of the main groups, the side of the main group. It would appear that the Sudarium was pinned to the back of the dead man head, and that these spots of blood were from small sharp objects which would logically be the thorns that caused this type of injury all over Jesus' head. So there is a lot about the Sudarium. It's kept, and they have a good history about the Sudarium from the 6th century. So they said if this was another piece of cloth that was at the same time, they took it out to Jerusalem as the Persian invasions was going through the Middle East, and they had to run ahead. It went through Alexandria, Egypt, and then to Algeria, and then crossed over to Spain, where it was kept and welcomed by a bishop there in Oviedo. That's the Sudarium. So let's go to another one from the Shroud. I'm not gonna keep you long. Just gonna give you a little bit more of the Shroud examination. This is the VP8. I would suggest that you look at this image a little bit from far, not closer to the screen. This is a machine used for analyzing data. And when this machine, you put an image under it, usually it distorted based on the black and white. Let me give you, this is how it looks when people move the image of the shroud back and forth. You need to go back a little bit from the screen so you can see what this image is about. This image analyzes any photograph. Not all photographs will give you this. It has to be a picture with 3-dimensional data on it. That means that the shroud was draped over a real face, was not drawn or painted on, or even taken as a flat picture. Has to be draped. And when you stretch it, it gives you that 3-dimension. This is VP8. And they said the scientists, when they looked at it, it was a similar shock to the one Secondo Pea got when he took his first picture. What else does it mean? The meaning of the shroud. So some people would want to see things to believe. And I think the shroud is giving us something to look at. It's not really, it's not a shocking thing to know that people had, I'm not saying it's essential to faith, but some people want some physical evidence. It doesn't mean that this will be the faith. The faith is the message that the church had given, but this will help many. I myself look at it and I'm still amazed by it. I know people lived and died, then the whole subject of their life was focused on the shroud. There was this gospel in St. John, and I want to look at that St. John gospel with you, where it's mentioned in the Gospel of St. John at the account of the resurrection. Chapter 20. When John and Peter were running, then Peter came in, and then John actually looked, stooping down, looking in, saw the linen clothes laying there, yet he didn't go in. Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen clothes also laying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloth, but folded together in a place by itself. You could say that this linen cloth is the cloth of Oviedo. That after the, I could think about it this way: after they dried up the blood and they put it around the head to keep the mouth closed. And the other disciple who came to the tomb first went in also, and he saw and believed. For they did not know the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. So what did he see that made him believe? What happened in that tomb, especially with he pointing out about the linen cloth? What is the linen cloth about? Why did Jesus leave it for us? I think it's to me personally, I think it's that longing to know what he looked like and what was he like, and especially he's not giving us himself as a portrait like people would say, and even in the Catholic tradition, the Veronica handkerchief. It is not. What's he giving us? And this is what retouched me from the beginning. He's not giving us an image of himself as he poses for a selfie that people do today. You know, he's giving us an image of himself crucified. When you ask people how the image was made, the Christian scientists would tell you. It's very simple to them. One of them in a report, he said, we call this in physics a recoil phenomenon. What's a recoil? They said. A recoil is when you take a weight, a stone or something heavy, and drop it in a bucket of water. What happens in the bucket? You got a splash of water coming back. There's a displacement of water at a high speed, depending on the force that you're throwing that stone with. So if an object or a body moves from one medium to another at high speed, you get a splash. They call it a recoil phenomenon. That one of the medium that the object is going through is going to splash back on the medium that's leaving. So he says, what I understand this to be is when Christ's body transformed at the resurrection, very high energy recoiled from that transformation. How you can make that? It's a mystery. Nobody knows. So Jesus transformed from a physical, limited body that is limited by time and space to a spiritual body that is actually glorious and it can go through the walls and come back from the other side. So imagine like this. We think of Christ appearing in the middle of the upper room as X-ray. He just appeared in the middle of the room, which is against all the physical laws. How can you do that? And so if this is going to happen in a flash of a second, then something is going to be imprinted somewhere. When other physicists looked at it, I remember one of them said, you get something like this from like a very high nuclear reaction, but for a very small amount of time. One Russian physicist said it on YouTube, and I liked what she said. She said, when you look at the image, if I put a flat, you know, a towel over my head, and I paint my head with oil, with paint, and then I turn this and show it to you, what would you see? Would you see my image? No. You will see a flattened head, like my head was run over by a bulldozer or something, and would look very distorted. So how did the image come out to be three-dimensional and it's proportionate? No distortion. So the woman, the physicist, is the only thing I can understand, that the shroud was straight, was taut. As the body of Christ was floating in the middle. In a second, that body was actually against the gravity, and then it's floating in midair, and all the radiation, they said this is what the physicists would say, all the image radiation that came from the image to make that image, from the body that made that image, is coming perpendicular to the shroud at the same time. So it recorded the distance. Every one spot is coming from the body at the same time at a different distance, creating a 3D image. It's not draped like this, and there's like a diffuse rays coming from everywhere. So they said, how do you make that? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Now, the last thing that I don't wanna, keep that from you. The carbon dating. Why was the carbon dating showing medieval times? I don't know. I'm not an expert on medieval carbon dating, but there's lots of things that you can that people proposed. Some of them said this was a weave done in France when people are expert, where people are expert in weaving. Some other scientists said no, there was nothing. We examined this. There was a man who died, was one of the scientists who was very interested in it. I was a fanatic against the shroud. His name is Ray Ray Rogers. Ray Rogers, once the carbon dating came out, he said, I'm done with this. I'm not studying this anymore. We let whoever fanatic go. about their business. But then the the Jewish photographer and his friends begged him. He's a chemist, a scientist in chemistry. Begged him to look at the remains of the charcoal pieces, or the remains of what Max Fry had taken for the pollen examination. And he said he examined it and found fibers of cotton. So he opened up the case and he published a paper before his death. He died with cancer, I think. And he caught himself before he died, and he published a chemistry paper and in a prestigious place, and it's published on the internet, that he found cotton fibers under the microscope, which could be dyed, because linen cannot be dyed. And this was one of the theories. People come back and say, no, this is not correct. We examined, and the debate goes on and on and on and on. People try to refabricate the image and make it again. And again, at the end, there is no known human way of replicating the image. There is no human way of replicating the image. If you look at the studies, everybody who tried to make it, they fulfilled one of the disciplines, like the STURP team said. You can actually do one like this with heat scourge. Although when you look at it, they say ultraviolet ray can detect scourge marks, but it would not detect this image. When you apply ultraviolet rays on this, you would have the scorch marks would light up, but the image itself would not. It would disappear completely. So you can do it with chemistry and put some chemical material that would actually replicate this on a corpse, on a statue or something, but will not have the physical. And it goes on and on and on. So people can try do this. It doesn't work with that, do this. But to really fit into all the characteristics, it's extremely almost impossible at our point of time, let alone done in medieval time. They should have the technology and the. So if they say it is 11th century, 12th century, 13th century, 14th century, nobody had any technology to do that. From my point of view, from the time it came out, it fit into everything I knew about the crucifixion. It fit into it perfectly and more. Nobody knew that Jesus' hand was down like this. Nobody knew that the thorns were covering all his head. Nobody knew that Jesus had a ponytail. And one of the studies done is this art historians. Art historians said before the 6th century, all the images of Christ were short hair, no beard, rounded face like Roman gods and Roman images. After the 6th century, it's a tall face, owl-like eyes, long nose, all the icons, a beard, and a ponytail. Where did they get that from, they said? Where at the 6th century, all of a sudden, all the icons are turning to be. 6th century is where Byzantium started to, or before that, when Byzantium started to be a kingdom and got the relic, they opened up for people to come. Iconographers started to work on this. And that's all what I have. There's a lot more to talk about, but I don't want to keep you here forever. You have any questions?
Nina B, you had a question?
Say it again. Say it again.
Mina just had a question. I just wanted him to say it, but I don't know if he's there. He said, is there evidence that this was taken from the tomb of Christ? What if someone says this could have belonged to another crucified person?
There's no documented trail of the shroud that we know. It's only histories from different places. But what we know now about documenting things, well, it's not been done there. So you're looking into the past. Even the Gospels, there's lots of the things in the Gospels that we have, and that we don't have like other extra biblical documentation. So the shroud is the same way. I just think it is up to the person to decide, like what everybody's saying. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide, is this something that you would, um, value and consider and cherish. The Catholic Church opened it recently for the TV on April 11, and they do a veneration of the shroud. The Catholic Church don't have a doubt that this is actually the burial shroud of Christ. I personally don't doubt it at all. There is nothing in it that contradicts anything I know. Science was not paying attention to it except recently, but before that it was a church object, like the relics of the martyrs. When you go to the church, I dare anyone to question the priest, is this really St. George? Let's see what the priest would say.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Vicent. Wasn't Jesus' body cleaned? Like, what was the tradition of cleaning the body after?
No, not in a case of a bleeding person. The blood is not supposed to be removed. They cannot. A person can be clean. This is traditionally true for Jews, but not when the person had died of bleeding or bleeding at the time of death. You cannot wash blood. You see it even in the terrorist attacks in Jerusalem. The righteous people from the Jews, the Pharisees or the rabbis, they would go there and with sponges and sponge all the blood from the ground where the explosion happened, and they will put it with the person to be buried. So no, they don't do that, especially when the person is bleeding. Traditionally, this is wrong. Don't do that.
Okay, thank you. And then last time it was shown in Turin was 2010, correct?
Yes, this is when I went. I went and I saw it in 2010.
Is it supposed to be 2020? Is it every?
I'm not sure. I'm not following when they're gonna show it again. But after Corona,
So obviously, yeah, obviously not anytime soon. But I thought it was every 10 years. But
no.
okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Let's say our Father. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. May the love of God the Father and grace of the Son Jesus Christ and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, peace be with you.
Thank you for having us, Abuna.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you.